Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making it on a noon at Tuesday. Welcome to this webinar on how to prevent eSign fraud. I'm Aditya, Director of Growth at Leegality. Today, I'm joined by Siddhant, our Director of Product, and Rachna, a Product Manager at Leegality. A few house rules. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them in the Q&A box below. Additionally, if you want to ask questions verbally, then we'll be hosting a live Q&A at the end where you can raise your hand and we'll give you mic access. So roughly, here's how this webinar is going to be structured. I'm going to start with a quick 3 to 4 minute introduction of Leegality, since there are many new joinees on this webinar. Then I'm going to spend 4 to 5 minutes talking about the concept of eSign fraud. What exactly is it that we're talking about? Why is it important to prevent it? And how exactly can you identify it? And after this context setting, about 8 to 9 minutes total, we would have identified the main types of eSign fraud, and I'll hand it over to Sid, who'll actually show you a bunch of features that we've developed to combat each and every instance of eSign fraud. So unlike our usual webinars where we show one feature, you're going to get a demo of multiple features through the course of this session. At the end, we'll of course have an open Q&A where you can ask us anything. First, let me quickly introduce what Leegality does. Right. So paperwork is the core legal foundation of all transactions in the formal economy. Without paperwork, it's impossible to enter into business relationships with customers, vendors, investors, agents, clients, other business partners, right? And a key reason is that paperwork provides legal security for each transaction, ensuring that both your rights as a business are protected and that all other parties signing it are also bound by what they have promised. Unfortunately, in the status quo, paperwork is largely physical, and this exacts a significant toll on Indian businesses day in and day out. Beyond basic direct costs, paperwork has deeper reaching indirect costs. For instance, many NBFCs and banks take up to a week to disperse a loan solely because the paperwork process takes that long. That week that you spend doing paperwork reduces the speed of loan dispersal, and that speed of loan dispersal impacts your business's overall growth. So you're not really recording this impact of time and speed on your balance sheet, but in reality, it's having a very significant impact. Now replace the use case of loan dispersal with any other use case, the story is the same. Or take something like productivity, right? At a branch, field, or office level, measure how much time branch and field officers are actually spending in the nitty-gritty of paperwork, negotiating printer jams, verifying correct info, coordinating with signers to get the document signed, then couriering it to whatever office they need to courier it to. On average, from our clients, we've got this input. On average, at least 2 hours are lost per day per branch in a physical paperwork flow. That's 2 hours that your team could have instead used for things like growing the business, more loan originations, more vendor onboarding, more customer service, right? The sky is the limit. Again, you're not measuring this impact on the balance sheet, but it's having an impact on what your balance sheet could have been, right? And of course, there's the legal risk that arises out of paper, missing pages, incorrect entries, and fraud, right? This webinar, we will be zooming into the specific problem of fraud. More on that in a few minutes. So seeing this deep-rooted problem, we built Leegality to solve this. How can we move businesses away from terrible physical paperwork to a new way that is still compliant, operationally flexible, and actually scales in the way physical paperwork currently operates at scale, right? And to do this, like we have to dispel a very big myth, right? There's a big myth out there that what you need is an eSign tool as a magic wand to make physical paperwork go away. But that's just not true. eSign is one component in a proper digital document execution process. To digitize paperwork at scale, you definitely need eSign in that process, but that's just not enough. You need a component that helps you digitize each and every leg of this multi-layered process, from stamping to security and enforceability. You need components that solve for operational needs like document assembly, document communications for internal stakeholders to do things like reviewing and signing off, to be kept in the loop about things, branding for customer comfort. You need scalability via automation, actual services provided by people, and analytics for decision makers to actually assess and course correct, right? And that's where Leegality comes in. We solve for each and every one of these components in one unified solution. So we're not an eSign tool. We are document infrastructure that helps you digitize your entire paperwork process. eSign is just a very important, but it's just a feature, right? In 2 minutes, we'll be zooming in on that third component, enforceability and security, how we built it to prevent fraud. Through Leegality, businesses see radically different results from their paperwork processes. Instead of becoming a drag on business, paperwork actually becomes a competitive advantage. You can now disperse loans that used to take a week in less than a day. Your teams get 2 extra hours a day to spend on other things. And the benefit that we'll really be focusing on in this webinar, your documents become more secure than they ever would have been in a physical process. We'll take you through how exactly we achieve this, right? But due to these fantastic results, more than 2,000 Indian businesses are currently using Leegality for paperwork at different stages of utilization. And they're using us for an uncountable number of use cases. If your use case is not shown here, it's just due to lack of space, not because you can't use Leegality for it. So with that out of the way, let's dive into the topic of this webinar, the exact topic, preventing eSign fraud, right? Fraud is a key risk when digitizing any process, right? Some stats on the screen right now from a variety of digital processes. I'm sure I missed many stats as well on the screen, right? Why does this happen? Why is fraud an ever looming threat when you're digitizing, right? There's one simple reason this happens. And it sounds slightly counterintuitive. The digital process actually often throws up vulnerabilities that are simply not present in the physical process, right? But when you digitize, you often forget to solve for these new vulnerabilities because you're chasing speed, you're chasing productivity. Compliance is often neglected. The vulnerabilities that actually crop up uniquely with digital are often forgotten, and trust in the entire system breaks down as a result. Fundamentally, if you don't solve this, your digital process may actually be more insecure than the physical process, with instances of fraud, impersonation, forgery, or at least it could attract that perception, even if there are instances of fraud are still less, right? So it's very important to prevent fraud. Now, unlike other factors, right, fraud has to be solved for in totality. Even a few instances of eSign fraud can break your entire system of digital documentation, like one falling domino pushing down others. Now, what exactly do I mean, right? So when you're evaluating, okay, I need to digitize my paperwork process. When you're looking at factors like speed or operational flexibility, which are often the top considerations when digitizing, right? With speed and operational flexibility, you can have some gaps and you can keep iterating as you evolve your process, right? So let's say 97% of your process is digital and there are 3% of cases where digital fails. While this is not ideal, you are still getting speed and operational benefits from having digitized 97% of your paper flow, and you will take that, right? So and in most digital implementations, actually 97% is very optimistic. You probably start from much lower, right? You start off in a pilot of one branch, one office. Then you gradually expand the usage of the digital tool across all your locations and offices. 5%, 10%, 15%, 45%, 97% utilization, right? And you're happy that, okay, in case of 50%, 50% is still slow, but at least 50% is fast, right? You're fine with that. You'll keep evolving and iterating that. But with fraud, you can't do this, right? You have to be fully fraud proof all the time. There's no pilots or gradual expansion with fraud proofing. Even when you do, say, your initial rollout in one branch or one location, that process, no matter how small scale in that branch, needs to be fully fraud proof. There really is no question of, let me roll this out. It has vulnerabilities that could arise in 50% of cases, but hey, in 50% of cases, it's working properly without fraud. So let me roll it out, right? It just doesn't happen with fraud. And if you don't become fully fraud proof, then you suffer big time, right? Even a small amount of fraud can lose you critical court cases. Small amount can draw red flags with regulators, and small fraud can ruin your brand and create credibility issues. That's why your compliance and legal teams are probably not going to let you go ahead with full-scale digitization of paperwork unless that last mile of fraud proofing actually happens, right? So while most business and product teams are enticed by the carrot of speed and efficiency when it comes to digital paperwork, speed and efficiency gains are honestly just a mirage if your process is not fraud proof. Your digital process is not going to sustain. One, it may not get approval itself internally. Even after it gets approval, it may break down in 6 months with even small instances of fraud creeping in, right? That's exactly the problem we want to solve with our fraud prevention suite, right? So far, we've been talking at a theoretical level. Let's dive into how fraud actually happens on the ground. In our experience so far, there are 5 common scenarios that are very commonly occurring and require mitigation when it comes to eSign fraud. First, the branch field agent or officer breaks internal rules and collects eSigns on incorrect documents. Second, there's collection of signature on a blank document. Third, signers use someone else's Aadhaar or DSC to e-sign a document. Fourth, unauthorized people gain access to a document, digital document link and sign it, right? And the fifth, which is a new one we've been developing for, when someone does an e-sign flow in an unauthorized manner and sends it to like you, right? Say you don't have control over the e-sign flow. You do not know what their e-sign flow was like, whether they did it in a way that's authorized by you, and you suffer as a result, right? So one thing is important to note, we'll dive into each of these and show you features that actually solve for each of these. But before that, it's important to know that we picked out the exceedingly common scenarios here. This is a ever evolving, ever evolving space, right? Fraud doesn't remain static. There may be new and developing vulnerabilities which we don't solve for yet, but are building for. The space, we are constantly looking out for new vulnerabilities in the paperwork process and promptly building to plug these gaps. So today's webinar is both a snapshot of how today existing in the product, we solve for very common fraud that happens, and two, an insight into how deeply we think of problems like this and ensure that in the future as well, we are staying on top of new types of fraud and actually building features that help you prevent new types of document and e-sign fraud. With that, let's come to the first type of fraud that we'll be covering with Aadhaar eSign, where a customer uses someone else's Aadhaar or DSC token to eSign. Here, I'll hand it over to Sid, our director of product. Sid, what exactly is this problem? What are the challenges and how do we exactly solve for it?
Right. So Aditya, I think the key to understanding how this aspect of fraud works and how we can mitigate it is to first understand how on the ground Aadhaar really works, especially in tier 2 India or rural India, right? Typically, whilst we have a very high degree of Aadhaar penetration in the country, we do have instances where multiple Aadhaar numbers are linked to a common mobile number, right, that's shared with the entire family, right? Not everyone in the family may have a separate smartphone, may not have a separate mobile number, etc., right? So in that context, it's really important to understand that it is entirely possible, right, that when you are contracting with another party, that party, there is a risk that they may intentionally or inadvertently end up using somebody else's Aadhaar, right? And from a contracting standpoint, one of the key security things that you have to bear in mind is that you are always contracting with the right person, right? And in an enforcement scenario, in a compliance scenario, in an audit scenario, you will need to demonstrate that you have taken the right steps to ensure that the right person is actually signing the document, right? Now, the good news here is that Aadhaar and DSC signatures, which are widely used in the country today, these obviously come with inbuilt fraud prevention tools, right? Like Aadhaar has an inbuilt authentication mechanism that requires you to enter an OTP to make sure that the right person is authenticating. However, typically you would need some extra protections in place, right? Because of the context that we just discussed, right? And that's where legality comes in, and that's where we actually add an additional layer of security that helps you protect against a scenario where somebody else's Aadhaar is being used, right? So let's actually take a look at how this happens. Ansha, can you just let me screen share? Is my screen visible?
Not yet, Sid. Now it's visible.
Okay, cool. You can see the legality dashboard, right?
Not yet. Now we can.
Okay, perfect. So here, very quickly to just dive into what we are trying to look at here. Now, let's say that we want to get a document e-signed, and we want to get the signature from Soumya Gakhar, right? That's the right person who needs to sign the document. We are going to enable the Aadhaar e-sign for this particular signature. Now, to prevent any risk that somebody else other than Soumya signs the document, you have a number of verification options in legality. Now, only Soumya's Aadhaar is used using name verification, right? What happens here is that when Aadhaar eSign happens, we look at this digital signature certificate. We see the name of the signer and we match that against the name that you have inputted, right? So here the matching will happen against the name Soumya Gakhar, right? In addition to that, you can also enable something called smart name verification. Smart name verification is a more sophisticated version of name verification, which accounts for the fact that sometimes there may be minor differences in the name as is captured in the Aadhaar versus the name that may be in your system, right? And in the name of fraud prevention, you don't want to inconvenience your genuine customers. So you can enable smart name verification. Smart name verification allows you to set a threshold of acceptance. So let's say that the names are matching at a threshold of 80%, you want to accept it, right? Whatever the threshold is entirely configurable. We'll take a look at that later as well, right? So these are the two primary modes of verification to ensure that the right person is signing the document. Now, in addition to this, there are also other parameters against which you can carry out verification, right? Which is PIN code, year of birth, last four digits, state, and gender, right? Because at the end of the day, with name there is some potential subjectivity always, so you can pair name verification with one of these other parameters that are likelier to be more objective, right? Like for instance, gender verification is a very useful threshold to have along with name verification to make sure that the right person is signing the document, right? So let's just see how this works in practice. I'm putting the gender as male, and we have enabled name verification here, right? Now, if we go ahead and proceed to the signing journey, is the signing journey visible, Aditya?
Yes. So one important thing is that the signer's name, intended signer in this hypothetical scenario, is Soumya Gakhar. Sid, what are you entering now? Whose Aadhaar are you entering now?
Here I am entering a different Aadhaar. I am entering my personal Aadhaar here. So this is an Aadhaar which is in the name of Siddhant Ramachandran. Right? So this is the case which often happens in real life, where somebody else's Aadhaar is being used to sign the document. Just waiting for an OTP to come through. Okay, we have it. Okay. So I've completed my authentication process, and we are now waiting for a redirection back to Leegality. Right. So here you see that an error occurred, right? We prevented the signing from going through because the verification details don't really match what in the way that you wanted, right? Here, obviously, because the name of the signer was different, right? So this is an example of how Leegality can help you prevent eSign fraud and ensure that the right person is signing the document, right? Not just this, you can also then check what exactly went wrong in the system. So from within the Leegality dashboard, you will be able to see
Sid,
where
I think the
exactly
last
did failure
last
happen.
20 seconds you'll have to repeat. Sid, you'll have to repeat the last 20 seconds. Your voice got cut. Last 20 seconds, you'll have to repeat the explanation.
Sure. No worries. So what I was saying was that once verification is completed, and let's say there is a failure, you will actually get logs on the Leegality dashboard suggesting that something went wrong, right? And you will be able to then take appropriate actions, right? So not only does fraud get prevented, you are also alerted within your systems, both on the dashboard, and if you're an API customer, then in your systems using our webhooks, you'll get real-time notifications indicating that a fraud happened, or there was a verification rather, so that you can then appropriately take care of the process, right?
Sid, there's one question
Another,
related to this feature.
yes.
Are the error messages customizable?
That's a very interesting that's a very interesting suggestion. For now it's not, because these error messages are actually standard across all customers, right? This is a ESP level message, right? That is standard across the industry. We don't really allow for customization of this message. But however, I mean, this is something that we can definitely look into. If there are cogent reasons why you would want a custom message to be displayed here, we can definitely look into that
I think
as
one
in
thing is
part of
though, for the customers
roadmap.
facing like customers and I think local language can be used, right, for one of the error messages.
Local language can be used for all the error messages. Yeah.
Right. So while the content, the message text itself can't be customizable, the language can
Yeah.
definitely be customizable via
That's right.
legality.
That's right. That's right.
Great. One more question on safeguarding the OTPs against common mobile numbers. So we will come to this. There's actually another feature that solves for this, and we'll come to that in a bit. Someone had asked a question on misuse, internal misuse at the client's end. That's an exact instance of fraud that we will be covering in a few minutes.
Perfect, perfect. Cool. Just to square this off, legality allows you additional configurability. So the flow that we saw here just now was one where the signing did not happen at all, right? We blocked the signature. But on legality's dashboard, you can actually customize the way you want this to happen. So if you want signatures to go through and then have a manual check at your end, you can actually set the config here to accept but respond with breakage or a drop off in the signing journey. The journey always gets completed. You will get a automated notification in your system that and then you can control the next steps accordingly. So this is again a very popular configuration that allows customers to balance fraud protection with speed and efficiency as well.
Ancha, if you can. So I think, Sid, there is also one new feature, like a new evolution of this feature, AI-powered smart name verification. Can you
Yeah.
explain that in a minute?
Yeah, so this is something that we've been working on for the last few months, something that we are very excited about. So smart name verification as it currently exists in our application uses a number of different string matching technologies and other custom logics to give a percentage match between two strings. Right, so it accounts for cases where, for instance, there is a salutation that can create a mismatch, like doctor or Mrs. or Srimati. It also accounts for cases where there are minor spelling mistakes, right? But there is a lot more to name verification here. In India, typically, there are instances, for example, where names are just jumbled or abbreviations are present in the name just because of different naming conventions in different states and for different ID cards. So smart name verification or AI powered smart name verification actually accounts for a lot of these custom situations that you actually see on the ground in India, and gives you a score that is predictive of actual similarity between two different names, which goes much beyond just string similarity. Right, so that's something that we are working on that gives you further sophistication in terms of how you are protecting yourself against fraud, whilst at the same time not compromising on efficiency and not causing a problem for genuine customers.
Great. Thanks for that, Sid. Let's move on to the next vulnerability. So this is where branch field agent gets the signature on an incorrect or blank document. Sid, what is this about? There are three different ways we seem to solve for it. Like, take us through that.
Yeah. So this is actually a very interesting one, where you have so many companies which have branches spread across the country, right? You would have hundreds of branches in the remotest corners of the country. You would have thousands of field agents, right? And one of the challenges that any good enterprise software has to solve for is to put in place adequate governance checks to ensure that bad actors and bad actions are protected against, right? We have a number of features that work very closely with our workflow engine to protect you against fraud within the company in the sending journey. Specifically, we've listed out here, but I think the best way to understand it would be to just screen share. So Aditya or Ansha, if you could let me screen share. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Perfect. Cool. So for this, let's get into our workflow engine. The workflow engine very quickly allows you to set certain parameters which all your users have to follow, right? So that allows your high-level employees who are admins in legality to control and protect against bad actors, right? So the number one capability here is that you can associate workflows with templates and then have those templates get auto-populated through an API integration, right? So let's just quickly see how that works. So let's say that I am creating a workflow here for one of my lending flows. I can associate that workflow with a template, which is this lending agreement template, right? So now, as you can see, we have a pre-populated template which has static text that's approved by your customers, by your internal legal teams. And the only thing that can change here in the template are these variable fields, right? Things such as application ID, customer name, borrower name, etc. Right? So this engine allows you protection in two ways. Number one, the core static content of the document, which has your terms and conditions, etc., can never be changed by your regular users, right? They are constrained to use this static text. They can't upload a blank agreement at all. Second, there is very limited capability to enter incorrect data here in terms of the variable fields as well, especially if you do an API integration, right? That would ensure that for all of these fields, right, and these fields could be very large in number, it could be up to 100 fields or even more, you could fill them directly from your internal systems, right? Like completely eliminating any manual actions or manual steps in the process that naturally protect you against instances of fraud or malified actions, right? So protect against cases where people are uploading incorrect documents, blank documents, or documents with just incorrect data, right? That can give a very misleading picture to your users and that can cause issues further down the line, right? So this is one core way in which we protect against fraud through our workflow engine. The other important capability in our workflow engine that is specifically designed to prevent fraud is our reviewer functionality, which is also commonly known as a maker checker process, right? So typically, even if this process is automated, you still want like one level of manual check to happen, right? So we have a capability called reviewer. You can mark the first person in this process as a reviewer, which could be your internal employee, right?
Siddhant, before you continue, we just had a
Yeah.
question, a slightly different question on, can we send a document that's already signed by user one to another user who needs to sign the same document? Just to answer that question, there are two possible answers. Now, if you're doing everything through legality, you can add as many signers as you want in the flow through the add invitee button through which Sid added the reviewer. You can add signers as well in that flow, right? You can add as many as you want, right?
Yeah.
So they can all within the same flow sign a document. And the fraud prevention control we talked about for Aadhaar in the previous step, or the other fraud prevention controls that we're talking about, either set at a workflow level, so they apply to all signers, or some of them are set at a signer level. You can set them for whichever signer you want. So if you're doing it through legality, then it's very easy to send one document to be signed by multiple signers. In the case of the second, we'll cover that at the end. If they sign it, let's say they sign it through legality and then send you the final legality signed document, what can you do? We'll cover that at the end. But through legality, it's very easy. You can have as many signers in one single flow, all digitally signing the document. Sid, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. So getting back to what we were discussing, you can add a reviewer or a checker in this process, right? So that they first get a copy of the document, they get to see who the invitees are, who has to sign the document, they check that the document has been prepared correctly, the correct stamp papers have been affixed to the document, they get to see all of this information. Only when they approve it can you proceed to the next step, right? Specifically when it comes to reviewers, we have an additional level of check as well, which is through this capability called prevent changes to signing order, right? What this means is that when you add a checker in the process or a reviewer in the process, you can configure your workflow in a way that the reviewer can never be overridden, right? If a reviewer rejects the document, uh, a sender will not be able to still manually activate other signers in the process. A sender will not be able to delete a reviewer from the process at all, right? And a sender will also not be able to activate signers out of turn before the reviewer has actually approved the document, right? So when you enable this capability, you completely lock down the signing flow until and unless the reviewer has approved the document, right? So this is an optional capability. Typically we leave it to companies to decide where exactly they want to draw the line on flexibility versus security, but this is a capability that specifically prevents malified actors from moving around and going out of the way of what your standard process is, right? So the reviewer is a very key capability that helps you have things in control and have a senior employee have a check in place. Other than this, another concern that a lot of customers have is, whilst you can predefine workflows and make sure that your employees are only able to follow those workflows, a lot of softwares also provide you a new document flow, right? Where basically you can do something outside of the workflow engine as well, right? But on legality, this is also customizable, right? Like you can configure your legality dashboard in a way that new document flows, which are flows outside of your predefined workflows, are completely disabled, right? And this is available out of the box. So you can go to your admin settings under the account tab and absolutely disable new document access for non-admin users, right? Which will constrain them to always use your workflows, which contain all your security measures, right? So those are the three primary ways in which.
Essentially, you're locking in your branch users to using the workflow you have set for them, and they'd have no other option that they can do on legality. Like they are locked into the workflow that you want. Sid, just one question. Can you quickly just show how reviewer looks from the reviewer's end, the reviewer
Sure,
interface?
sure, let's do that. So we have two invitees here. The first one we'll mark as a reviewer, and the second one is a signer.
You
Right.
can, so one thing you notice when say press a tick, you can also record the reviewer in the audit trail. So if you need to have a post facto third party audit that, okay, was the proper internal check and control followed, you can actually record the entire action of reviewing in the audit trail as well.
Great. Cool. So let's just quickly send this out and see how this works in practice. Is the document preview visible?
Right, it is. So again, the reviewer, practically what Sid showed you is kind of through our dashboard where you can copy the link on the browser. But what will happen is here the reviewer gets the link via email or via an SMS, and soon to be via WhatsApp as well, if you want that. Yeah, Sid, go ahead.
Yeah, and you can look at the entire document. You can look at who has to sign the document, what their statuses are. If you have added other capabilities like reference attachments, then reviewers can also view those reference attachments to see that the attachments have been correctly placed. If there is a stamp paper here, then the stamp paper would also be visible on the first page of the document, so that the reviewer can see that the right stamp paper has been affixed to the document. And then to proceed, there is an authentication leg in a reviewer journey as well, right? So that the reviewer journey is not compromised in any way, and that nobody can circumvent it, without authentication, right? So there is that extra authentication layer to protect against abuse here as well. And then the reviewer can either approve or reject the document.
So if they reject the document, I think there's one thing when you press reject, I think you can give comments as well, right?
Yes. So in case of rejection, you can set comments which will be visible to the sender on the dashboard, so that they can appropriately correct the document when they send it out again in the future. Yeah. So now that we approve the document, the next signer is now active, and then they can sign the document. So that's an overview of the reviewer process. And since we covered this in the audit trail as well, and we enabled the option to record details in the audit trail, we also have all of the trail here, right? That the invitation was sent.
We'll share a completed reviewer audit trail with you in the post webinar email, which we will send within 48 hours of this webinar ending, probably earlier, but 48 hours upper limit. We'll send you some documents that show all of these things.
Yeah. So to summarize, Aditya, there are multiple capabilities in the workflow. The nature of the workflow as a whole itself is to set your security measures that nobody can override, but specifically lock down your agreement, and lock down your static content and variable content. Have a maker checker in place that you can never circumvent, and that's baked in through an authentication mechanism to prevent impersonation of reviewers. Right, all of these capabilities work together, along with making sure that only workflows can be used. So these capabilities together protect you against any type of bad actors or bad actions from your branches or from your field agents across the country.
Great. I think two interesting ones. One, Aadhaar, which is a vulnerability that uniquely crops up in the digital flow. And this one is a vulnerability that crops up both in physical and digital, but where with digital, you can actually solve for it in a way that it will be very hard to do in a physical flow. With that, let's go to the third vulnerability, the third instance of fraud. This is when a branch, field agent, or officer gets the document signed outside the branch. Sid, why is this a big deal? Like, what's wrong if they sign it outside the branch? Like, why is this an instance of fraud, or why can it be an instance of fraud?
Sure. So it's not always a problem if the signature does not happen in a branch, right? There are many companies which do carry out signatures remotely, and we have a lot of protections against that as well. But in those cases where your internal policies require you to sign within a branch, it's really important that you are following those processes. And right, and the reason for that is that in a branch, you have a number of steps that you would take to ensure that things are kosher, right? So you can, in a branch, you would know that like there are other employees around the branch to make sure that processes are being followed. There are other customers in place. So it prevents instances where agents are coercing users to sign documents or enter into transactions against their consent. So there is a natural protection against any sort of bad activity when you do signing inside a branch. It's a more controlled environment, and typically if your policies mandate that, then you want to follow that and ensure that the software has capabilities to ensure that you can actually comply with your regulations, right? So that's where you want to ensure that if that transactions are only happening inside a branch or within a certain area or within certain specified parameters, and we obviously have a couple of features that specifically address those use cases. So
let's have a look.
Yeah, let's have a look at those.
One quick question on reviewer that was just asked. So Sid, as you share your screen, I'll answer it. Can a reviewer also be a signer? Great question. So while the reviewer role assigned, that person cannot sign. If you assign them as a reviewer role, you can easily accomplish this by just, instead of making them a reviewer, just make them a signer. You can switch on like a signing type like virtual sign, which is an OTP plus a signing pad, kind of like an internal sign off, right? You can replicate that internal sign off with a visual impression of a sign as well. For that, you don't need to really switch on reviewer. You can switch on, just make them a signer directly with, say, a virtual sign. And in the fields, you can specify this is like where the reviewer is signing. So you can achieve that job. You don't achieve that via the reviewer feature, but you can achieve that via our other signing options.
Yeah, and also just to add to that, in our signing journey as well, you can add an option that allows signers to reject documents specifically, and also give comments in case a rejection is happening, right?
Right.
So in that case, you can actually set up your signer with all the capabilities that a reviewer has.
Hope that answers your question. Again, a lot of these questions that we've answered live. In case there's a follow-up, please do raise your hand at the end, or please do drop the follow-up in the Q&A box in case there is still some ambiguities. Okay, Sid, so what are you showing us now?
Cool. So now we are looking at two of our capabilities that help you add another layer of protection to ensure that the signing journeys are happening in the right manner, that the right people are signing, and that there's nothing untoward happening, right? And these capabilities are nested inside our security features, which is GPS capture as well as face capture, right? So we can have a journey that enables both. And specifically, we'll also look at a subset of face capture, which is user liveliness, right? And I'll talk about that more when we actually see it in the signing journey. Just quickly sending this out. Is the signing journey visible?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So you would be intimately familiar with this flow already. So I'm just going to breeze through this. Right. So the first step that happens here is a GPS capture that captures a number of different things. First, it captures the latitude, longitude. It gives you a snapshot of where exactly you are in a map, right? So this allows you to triangulate the position of the signer, right? So in case you are doing a branch-based signing and you want to make sure that there is a auditable trail that can be reviewed by an external party to say that, okay, this signing was done in the right place, etc. You can use our geolocation capture for that capability. So here you can see latitude, longitude, as well as an image highlighting where they are in the map. In addition to this, we also convert this to an actual address that gets recorded in the audit trail, right? So we'll come to the audit trail in a bit, but all of these three data points will get captured in the signing journey, right? One thing to add here, if the GPS capability is not enabled in a particular phone or a device, you will not be able to go through with the journey at all, right? So the journey will be blocked if you actually don't have GPS capability, or you are not granting access or permission to capture a GPS location, right? So this is a way to enforce that this data is always collected from an auditability point of view. Let's move on and look at face capture. So there are two aspects to face capture. One is a straightforward face capture capability that captures the image of the signer. Again, helps you identify the fact that the right person has signed the document. Very, very useful when you have a review process thereafter as well, that identifies and tracks whether the signer correctly was present before the device at the time of signing. On top of this, we have a capability called liveliness check, right? So you would remember that when we enable face capture, we also enable liveliness check. This specifically helps prevent cases where to get through face capture, you're just like impersonating another person, right? Like either putting an image of that person in front of the signing journey, in front of the camera, to get away with the actual requirement of capturing a live image of the customer, right? So in this flow, which is the enhanced flow with user liveliness, in addition to a face capture, there is also a liveliness check in the form of an OTP flow, right? So let's see how this works. There are two options here for the user to demonstrate liveliness. One is that they can write this OTP on a white sheet of paper and hold it up in front of the camera. The other option is that they scan this QR code, which will automatically give you this OTP on your phone, and you can just display that in front of the camera, right? So both of these steps need to be performed, right? My face needs to be in front of the camera as well as the OTP, right? Any one or an incorrect OTP will not lead to a successful capture. There are many checks that we have built in here as well. For example, if my face is covered and it's not thoroughly visible, it would throw an error. If there are multiple faces, it would again throw an error, right? So there are multiple ML based checks that are incorporated here to make sure that it's actually a human and not and that there's an actual face that has a recognizable human in it, for the process to go ahead, right? So all of these security measures are already baked into the process, right? Now once all of these things are complete, you can proceed to sign the
Sid,
document.
just quick, sorry,
Yeah,
just layman question. Possible to show what happens if you didn't put the OTP up?
sure, let's give it a try. So I'm not going to show any OTP. It's going to throw an error that OTP cannot be detected, please try again, right? And I can actually show my older OTP as well. If I try my older OTP, it will tell you that there is an incorrect OTP, right? So you need to enter the right OTP, which is valid for only a limited amount of time to actually go through, right? Um, cool. So moving ahead, I'll have to now do this successfully. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so we are done. Let's complete the signing process and move ahead. So that completes the journey with both authentication layers completed. Let's also quickly see the audit trail to see how this actually panned out. Can you see my can you see the audit trail here?
No, I think it's on the other screen.
Okay, 1 second. Can you see it here?
No, I think you'll have to stop sharing and reshare the audit trail screen.
Wait, hold on, hold on. What about now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So as you can see, all the data points that got captured here in the signing journey are also captured in the audit trail, right? For you to be able to demonstrate to an audit team or do internal checks to make sure that everything is good, right? The images that got captured along with the OTP are present in the audit trail. The location that was captured in terms of the latitude, longitude coordinates, the placement on the map, as well as the address, right? Specifically Pali Road, Mumbai, etc. All of these data points are captured in the audit trail for you to actually be able to review that the journey was properly completed, right?
Another
And
thing is, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah,
No,
and
no.
that brings us to two exciting product launches that are imminent in our flow that actually will help you automate this process as well, right? To make sure that these security checks happened in a way that was compliant with your internal process. Number one, for geo location capture, we are launching this new capability called geofencing, where you will be able to pass the latitude and longitude coordinates into our system when you trigger the signing journey, and specify the radius within which you want the signing to happen. And the journey will be successful only if these coordinates that actually get captured fall within that permissible radius, right? So that is one capability that will automate the manual review process that a lot of our customers do currently. Secondly, with respect to the face capture and user liveliness products, we are imminently launching two upgrades. One is a face match capability that will match the face of the signer against any source image that you're uploading from your system, as well as a new way of doing a liveliness check that relies on gestures, right, and not necessarily on an OTP, right? So all of these changes together will further automate any manual review that you may be doing in the process, and completely automate the flow.
Great. I think that's very interesting. So I think now we solve for the authentication and give people the ability to manually review and detect fraud with existing face and GPS,
Yeah.
as well as building that seriousness in the mind of the customer, which is a reason a lot of our clients have given us.
Yes.
Right. And with geofencing and face match, we will be solving the third leg of not just mitigation, fraud mitigation, but actually building a kill switch, just like Aadhaar smart name, which actually just stops the transaction.
Yeah.
Great.
That's right. I think, Aditya, you touch upon a very important topic, which is having all of these steps in place actually give a message to the user and the signer that this is a very serious process that has to be done appropriately, right? So when you ask a user to capture their face, when you ask a user to capture their location, when you ask the user to do an Aadhaar eSign that requires them to enter their Aadhaar, user behavior and psychology dictates that you will automatically see lesser instances of fraud happening compared to running a process like a non-OTP based click wrap, right? Which has no protections, which gives gives a feedback to the user that they can do anything that they want, right? So that's actually a very important point when designing any flow, if you want to protect against fraud in terms of what kind of signals are you communicating to the users.
Great. Let's come to the fourth vulnerability, unauthorized people. And I think this was a question we received when we were demoing Aadhaar verification at the beginning.
Yeah.
How do you prevent, because it's operating through a signing link system, right? Like you are also opening a signing link and showing it. Now in a flow, how do you prevent someone else from taking that link and running with it and doing sign with it?
Yeah, so this is again a very important security risk that has to be addressed, right? Because these days, so much of our identity is tied to your phone that, let's say, your phone gets compromised, right? You may become subject to a lot of fraud, right? Like people will get access to sensitive data, sensitive links. So it's important that you use a software that has capabilities that protects against such situations, right? And there are two specific capabilities that we have that protect against cases like this. One is a mandatory OTP based login before you even get to document preview, and another is a two-factor authentication that balances fraud with efficiency, right? So
let's have a look.
Yeah, if you allow me to screen share. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You are seeing the dashboard, right?
Yes.
So here, just running through these steps, which we are familiar with already. Okay, so we'll actually try looking at these two features. So just entering my credentials first. Right. So the number one thing that helps with preventing fraud is entering two credentials in cases where you do have both credentials, right? So here, if we enter an email and a mobile number, that opens up a possibility that you can actually do a double authentication process, right? Let's look at how that happens. Again, let's go to the security features. Right now, there are two capabilities here. One is require one-factor authentication before document preview. This means that even if somebody gets access to the link somehow, they will still need to enter an OTP or authenticate themselves otherwise before they actually see the document, let alone proceed with the signing journey, right? So one factor authentication is one key step. That's a mandatory OTP step that you can introduce to protect against cases where your sign link gets accidentally leaked, right? The other capability that's interesting here is a two-factor authentication process, um, which will require the user to authenticate or prove that they have access to both credentials here, right? Which is mobile number as well as email, right? And this is a really strong feature from an anti-fraud perspective, because compromise of any one credential will still protect the integrity of the signing journey, right? Let's see how this works in practice, right? So we are going to enable require two-factor authentication, save it, and just send this document out. Now, let's say I get access to this link, right? In an unauthorized way. I'm going to start the signing journey. So first step here is that uh, it's asking me for an OTP that goes to my email, right? So there is no direct access, even though I got the link. There is an authentication leg here. So let me just enter my OTP first.
I think your OTP is expired.
No, just waiting for
Okay.
it to come through. Okay, got it. Cool. So, so I entered my OTP, and what it did was it's now asking me for a second factor of authentication, right? It's asking me for a OTP that goes to my phone, which is a different OTP, right? It's not even the same OTP that is going to both credentials, it's a different OTP, right? So now, even if my email got compromised, I would still need to enter another credential. So let me just enter that.
Right. And it's important because when you're sending it to a company, right? If you're sending it to a company or an entity with multiple signatories, often the sender sign, like the email ID may be a commonly accessible email ID. So
Yeah.
having the mobile authentication ensures that even if they get past that filter, it's very like hard for them to get past the
Yeah.
unique mobile number filter.
Yeah. So here you see that before getting to document preview, I had to go through two authentication steps through different credentials which have different OTPs. Uh, we've added one level of convenience to this, however. You would have noticed that I actually opened the sign link from the dashboard itself. So I didn't open the sign link from an SMS that I received on my phone or an email that I received. Had I opened the signing link from an SMS or my email, then I would have been asked to enter only the other set of credentials, right? Because if I had opened the link from my SMS inbox, it presumes that I already have access to that inbox. And similarly, if I had opened my link from my email inbox, it would have presumed that I have already got access to my authenticated access to my email. So it would have only asked authentication for the other factor, right? So it balances fraud with efficiency, right? Like if you actually demonstrate that you have control over one factor, then you need to enter only the other factor. But if you're just getting access to the link through any other means, then you'll necessarily need to enter both factors.
Great. So I think we've covered 4 different. Ansha, if you can share the deck. I think right now, so actually even face match capture, face match feature which Sid talked about can be used to actually also do the same job of preventing this type of fraud when we launch it in the coming months. But I think so far we've shown you 4 different types of ways to safeguard the flow itself from fraud, right? This is fraud control in the flow. But the key element of all 4 is the flow is completely in your control. You are actually initiating it via legality. You are the legality controller. There is another scenario where you may not be the controller. Anja, if you can go to the next slide, right? So there are 2 scenarios here, right? One are, let's say there's in your business flow, another party is getting it signed through their own legality account or through their own like way of digitally signing it. And they're sending you the final document, which you then need to store, right? This is very common. For example, with the LODR guidelines by SEBI, where stock exchanges collect digitally signed documents from other parties, right? How do you ensure that this process that they've done, that is out of your control, that they've done on their own, has been done properly, right? And the second is, let's say the document is done in your flow, you know you entered the fraud controls, you know that this has been solved for. But there's a third party, like a regulator or an internal auditor or a third party auditor, who wants to show that, okay, you claim that you had all these fraud prevention features. Now, show me for these 1,000 documents that you signed that you've actually done this. Show me that these are fraud proof, right? How do you actually at scale attest to the sanctity of your flows, right? So how do you solve for these 2, you can say post-signing scenarios? One where you don't know how it's been signed, right? And 2, where you've signed it, but you need to show someone else, look, I have done it properly, right? How do you solve these 2 things? I'll hand it over to Rachna, who was pivotal in developing a feature we built to solve this.
Hey,
Ansha, if you can give Rachna a screen share.
good afternoon, everyone. I hope my screen is visible. Is it?
Yes.
Cool. So we have developed digital signature verifier, and I, as a product manager, I'm excited to share that what all it has. For example, you have n number of documents with you, which might be the invoices, or which might be the AOA or MOAs, or the documents that have been signed out of your control, like Aditya rightly explained. Now, how do you make sure that the signer was the correct person or not? How do you make sure that the signature certificate of the signer is not expired? How do you make sure that issuer of that signature certificate is the right authority? You can do it for 1 or 2 documents manually, maybe, or you can use tools like this that we have. This is a tool which is accessible to anyone, and you can use it free of cost. So I'll just show you by uploading a PDF. So I've uploaded a PDF which is digitally signed, and I want to check whether or not it has valid signatures and whether or not it has been tampered with after it was signed. So I'll initiate the verification process, and there is a captcha that I have to go through so that this website is not attacked by robots or or any bulk PDFs are not uploaded over here. So as you see, I can see the result that all signatures are valid over here and one valid signature is found. So this front end has been making call to the backend APIs, wherein all the checks were performed, which I just spoke about. Now let's take a look at the details that the API has given, that who's the person who has signed this document. So this API returns that the document has been signed by Jitendra Singh and his PIN code, year of birth, gender, the last four digits of Aadhaar, state, issuer of the signature certificate, and the sign time and the validity start and end date. All of these details are found in the signature certificate of the signer, which you are able to see. And you can be rest assured that the signature certificate was valid, it was not expired. And you can be also rest assured that the issuer is a valid issuer, because the API in the backend performs chain validation checks as well, which means we try to first understand if the ESP is a valid ESP, then the root certificates are also checked further. Now, this is the front end, but if you have n number of PTFs, hundreds or thousands of them, you can definitely use the API product, wherein I'll just show you. This is the API and I'm trying to log in into the API. Now I'll just try to upload the same PDF. However, you can upload n number of PDFs here. This is one.pdf. It's the same PDF which I had uploaded here, just to show you the results and how they are different over here. Now, what additional feature API offers you is that you can also cross verify. For example, you were looking forward to the signatures of Abhijit in the document. You were expecting someone named Abhijit to sign the document, and you knew that his gender is male, his year of birth is this, his last four digits of Aadhaar are this, a postal code is this, and state is Rajasthan. Now, because you were expecting this person to sign and you don't know who has signed the document, you can definitely pass the signer details over here and also request the API to give you a verification report. So once I do this, you see I have got a result which says indicative response and this is false, which means that the certificate found in the document is not that of Abhijit. If you see it, it returns the certificate details of the signer, and it also gives the details as the name is not a match, so it's returning false. The gender is a match, so it's returning true. Year of birth is not a match, so it's false. And title is also not a match, so it's false. Postal code and state, of course, are false because the signer who has signed the document, actually his state is Uttarakhand and the state here passed was Rajasthan. So basically, the feature allows you to verify n number of PDFs for the use case where you are trying to understand if the right person or the person who was authorized signatory according to you has signed the document or not. It is possible to check manually for one or two PDFs, but for the bulk use cases, it's not possible. And this API has returned a verification report as well. So I'll just show you what is in there in the verification report. This returns the document ID, the document hash, total number of certificates found. We have found one valid certificate. The API runs for n number of signatures. Even if you feed the API with hundreds of documents and each document has some 10 or 12 signatures, you will see that verification report will return the certificate details of all the signers found. So if you see the signature is valid, the details of the signer are here. There is this timestamp that we try to fetch. Then we fetch the issuer name and the issuer organization, validity start and validity end date, and the verification response. This is the matching that we had done against a name, state, PIN code, gender, and YOB. And whatever is matched is green, and whatever did not match is red in color. So this is about the API product. And to know more details about it, there is this API documentation which is hosted on docs.legality.com/verifier, will put the link in the email that will be rolled out after the webinar, and anyone can go through the documentation and try to understand how it works. It's a standalone API product which can be used for documents signed through Leegality or outside Leegality. And I would like now. I would
Anshul,
like
if
to
you can
walk you
share.
through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to walk you through the summary of the demo that you just saw. What we just did, we passed signer details that we need to check in Legality's Verifier API. If you recall that I passed name, YOB, gender. You can pass any one of the parameters as well. If you just want to verify the name, that's also fine. And then Legality searches for eSign certificates. Our API actually tries to extract the signatures out of the document, then finds out whether the certificate issuer is valid or not, and runs multiple checks. After all the checks are run, Legality matches the passed signer details with details available in the eSign certificate. And if the details matches, correct signer has signed the document, we return a green response. And if someone else has signed the document, then it was returning a cross symbol. So you also get a verification report that tells you which signer details are matched and which didn't match, like you saw. Anja, if you can just move to the next slide. So understanding the eSign verification report, I just walked you through it. We return the signer details, we return the reason of failure. We also run our crawlers on cca.gov.in to make sure that we are fetching the right expired and unexpired root certificates every week. The crawler runs every week. So we also know if the certificate is part of the revocation list or not. If it is, then we also return failure reasons like the certificate found in your document is part of the revocation list. Hence, the document is not safe for further use. Now, the matching results that I had showed you, these were the parts of the verification report, and the checks have been explained by me in bits and pieces while showing the demo as well. But just to summarize them here, we do document integrity checks, which means we make sure the document is not tampered with after signing. There is no way for you to check it manually for bulk use cases. And it's safe to say that Legality's verifier product, it's a one of its kind of product, and nobody in the market is right now serving such a comprehensive solution which allows you to do checks based on name, gender, YOB for bulk documents. Then second is eSign certificate validity check, wherein I told you that we make sure that the issuer is a valid issuer. Then eSign certificate chain validation check. The chain validation check means that whenever a document is fed by you, like I said, we are going to try to understand who's the ESP, who has issued ESP the certificate. And then further on, we also try to understand if NSDL is the issuer, who has issued them. If it's CCA, then we also try to understand if their certificate is, all the certificates are valid over there or not. Then timestamp token validation check, which tries to understand at the time of signing whether the certificate was valid or not. Then cross-checking the given signer details against data given by the user that we just did. So I think these are a few checks that we perform, and for further details, you can definitely refer to the API documentation.
Great.
Oh,
Thanks, Rachna. So I think two things you saw. One, there's a free tool. We'll be sharing the link of the free tool with you in the email. But that tool, obviously, at scale, if you have 1,000 documents you need to verify, doesn't work. For which there is an API, for which we'll share the API documentation. Right. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. So I hope you got a clear idea of how exactly Leegality helps you fraud-proof your documentation at all stages of the execution process, right? Features that help you prevent fraud during the sending process by agents and officers, ensuring that doesn't happen. Features that help you ensure that fraud during the signing process, either by a signer or by a field or branch officer, does not happen, right? And with our new Verifier API, which Rachna just showed you, we help you detect fraud in flows outside your control, as well as attesting to the sanctity of your own flows for an audit, right? So making that possible at scale. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm reiterating this. This is a snapshot of what we solved for today. If you came to us 12 months back, this list would have been even shorter. If you come to us 6 to 9 months down the line, this list will have even more features, right? As Sid mentioned, over the next few months, we will bring you 3 new fraud proofing mechanisms: geofencing with GPS, right? Face capture with face match, and AI-based matching for Aadhaar and PAN verification. These are features already in development. As new vulnerabilities crop up, we are cognizant of them and we immediately start solving for them, right? So this is a snapshot of what we solve for today for very common use cases that we see. But this is not a static space. And as new vulnerabilities crop up, Leegality will continue to build to solve for those vulnerabilities in the digital document space. We solve for fraud in the digital document execution journey, not in any other journey. With that, thank you for attending this webinar. We'll open up a live Q&A. Ansha, before that, if you can just go to the next slide. In case you want to explore these features in detail in a personalized demo, if you're an existing Leegality customer, please contact your customer success manager or email support@leegality.com. This is if you're an existing Leegality customer. If you're not a customer yet, there are two ways. Like you're either in conversation with us, in which case you have a sandbox account. Contact your POC that you're in touch with. If you're not a customer but are in touch with us, contact your POC, ask them to show you this demo. Otherwise, write to us at enquiry@leegality.com or give us a call on the number below. We'll be sharing these details in the post-webinar email, which we will be sharing within 48 hours of this webinar. Right? We would be happy to show you deep personalized demos. We'll be happy to show you these demos again. We'll share resources with you and a recording of this webinar that you can show internally in your organization. Please feel free to contact us. Shubhash, if you can also drop in my email ID and Siddhant's email ID in the chat box, you can email Siddhant or I in case you have any questions as well, right? So in case anything, we will be sharing a recording to reach out to us on these contact details or reach out to Siddhant and I directly. With that, we'll take a few questions. I think there were 2 questions that we did not answer live. 2 interlinked questions, slightly not related to fraud, but very relevant questions. One is, how does one accommodate international mobile numbers for signatories within the signing journey? And the second one was, does Leegality work in other countries, specifically with the question was about Nigeria, right? 2 interlinked questions. I think the answer is right now we don't have international mobile number support, although we're soon rolling out WhatsApp and there is a way to do international mobile number support, but operationally it's very tough because there are different commercial implications for different mobile numbers. A very easy way to work around this is with Leegality, you can send documents via email. You can send this to any email around the world, right? So you can use Leegality internationally, provided you use email as the authentication and email as the contact coordinate to which you're sending the signing link. Right? If international mobile is still a very key use case for you, do contact us. We'll see if we can work something out. We have a lot of clients who use us for NRI flows, NRI signing flows. That happens via email. So those were the 2 questions that we didn't answer. Does anyone else have any other questions? You can do 2 things. You can ask in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand here on Zoom and we'll give you mic access. If you want to verbally ask us a question, or if you want to see something Sid was showing, you want to see it again, we're happy to show you. Great. We'll just give it a few more minutes. We've also answered some questions like via typing, and they're in the answered box. We will also share the text of the question and answer in the post-webinar email. That's why it will take us about 48 hours to just compile everything together, but we'll share that in the post-webinar email. In case you don't get it, again, the contact coordinates are on the screen in front of you. You can also reach out to Siddhant or I. The email address is in the chat box. So for any doubts, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to help. Both the contact coordinates on the screen and Siddhant and my email ID in the chat box. With that, we'll just give it 2 more minutes. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. If you don't raise your hand. Otherwise, I think we can end the webinar in exactly 2 minutes. Sid, is there anything you want to say in closing?
Just curious to know if anybody has interest in some of the newer things that we are working towards, like face match or geofencing. Like, feel free to drop in a line to us, and we'd be happy to walk you through some prototypes in one-on-one sessions, to give you a sneak peek into what we are doing.
And we encourage you to do that because you can then be a part of our testing process. Testing it with people outside legality, there's no replacement for that. We can do as many internal tests, but ultimately testing it with actual users is the best possible test we can do. Great. I think we can end the webinar. Thank you, everyone. 12 o'clock on a Tuesday is not, appreciate you making time on a Tuesday. Okay, we have someone's hand raised. So I'll just allow you to talk. Yeah, Abdul, you can talk. You can just unmute and talk. Unless you just wanted to say that you're interested in the feature, in which case you can just type that in the chat box. You don't have to talk. But I've given you mic access. If you want to talk, you can unmute the mic.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for this section. I really appreciate the Leegality software. So my question is that, does Leegality save from deepfake technology? And also, you said Leegality cannot authorize by the international numbers via only email. What about you said for the OTP codes, you're going to be shared with only India's numbers.
Correct.
So are we safe from these risks in order to transaction with the email? Are you going to send the OTP codes via our email, or how are you going to do it with the international number? Let me go back to my first question. Does Leegality safe from this deepfake technology? I hope you got it right.
I'll just answer your second question. The first question you need to repeat. The second question is very simple. Right now, we don't support international mobile number OTPs. So we will send the OTP only to emails. You'll have to use your email ID as the mode of authentication for international flows. So international mobile number is not supported right now.
Okay.
We will definitely update you as and when we do support that. If you can just repeat your first question.
Okay. Does Leegality save from deepfake technology?
So I can take that one, Abdul. So I think what you're asking is, if somebody tries to spoof the face capture authentication process using a deep fake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some inbuilt security measures in place that protect against that, right? Which we saw in the demo as well, which is that it's not just that you need to be in front of the camera, which can still be replicated by a deep fake, but you also need to hold up an OTP, right? So, and that OTP changes every 5 minutes, right? So even if you make a deep fake, if you have liveliness enabled, you will actually not be able to go through, because the OTP that needs to be held up will change every 5 minutes, right? So there are protections against that, that are inbuilt. So I mean, that's primarily the safeguard at this moment against something like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Abdul. Feel free to reach out to us offline as well in case you have any further questions.
All right, no problem.
Thank you. Right. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we will close in exactly 30 seconds. Just a quick reiteration. Feel free to contact us on the contact details on screen right now, or drop Siddhant or me a line on our email IDs shared in the chat box. And within 48 hours of this webinar, we will be sharing a recording and other resources. In case you don't receive that, feel free to reach out to us on any of these contact details or on LinkedIn or wherever you find us. You can also visit our website and contact us there as well. Great. I think we can end the webinar. Thanks so much, Siddhant. Thanks, Rachna, for making time. And thank you to the audience. We had a great turnout for making time on a very busy day, like Tuesday is a very busy day of the week, and at a peak time of 12 p.m. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.